Question 1. Stakeholder feedback indicates a need for clarity on appropriate responses to potential violations of Texas law. A Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy arrives at a residence following a report of a domestic disturbance. Upon arrival, the deputy observes a person physically restraining another individual in a manner that appears to be against the restrained individual's will, and the restrained individual is expressing distress. Considering the Texas Penal Code, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the deputy? Option A. Attempt to mediate the dispute between the individuals without taking any immediate action to address the physical restraint. Option B. Leave the scene immediately to attend to other reported emergencies, as the situation does not clearly constitute a felony offense. Option C. Secure the scene, assess the immediate threat to all individuals, and if probable cause exists, lawfully arrest the individual for unlawful restraint under Texas Penal Code Section 20.02. Option D. Detain the individual based solely on the distressed individual's verbal complaint without further investigation or observation of the restraint. Correct answer is C. Secure the scene, assess the immediate threat to all individuals, and if probable cause exists, lawfully arrest the individual for unlawful restraint under Texas Penal Code Section 20.02. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy by requiring them to navigate a situation involving a potential violation of Texas Penal Code concerning unlawful restraint, while also considering the immediate safety of all parties involved and the procedural requirements for evidence preservation. The deputy must balance the need for swift action to prevent further harm with the obligation to conduct a lawful investigation and respect individual rights. The complexity arises from the need to make a rapid assessment of the situation, determine probable cause, and act within the scope of their authority under Texas law, all while maintaining composure and professionalism. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves securing the scene, assessing the immediate threat to all individuals, and then, if probable cause exists, making a lawful arrest for unlawful restraint under Texas Penal Code Section 20.02. This approach is correct because it prioritizes the safety of the victim and others, adheres to the legal standard for arrest in Texas, probable cause, and initiates the formal legal process for addressing the alleged offense. The deputy must articulate the specific facts and circumstances that led to the belief that a crime had been committed and that the suspect committed it, which is the cornerstone of probable cause in Texas. This aligns with the sheriff's office's duty to enforce Texas law and protect citizens. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to ignore the situation and leave the premises without taking any action, even if the deputy believes a crime has occurred. This is a failure to uphold the duty to enforce Texas law and protect citizens, potentially allowing a violation of Texas Penal Code Section 20.02 to continue unchecked. It demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and a disregard for public safety. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately detain the individual without establishing probable cause, based solely on the complainant's statement without independent verification or observation. This could lead to an unlawful detention or arrest, violating the individual's rights under the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and potentially exceeding the deputy's authority under Texas law. It bypasses the critical step of forming a reasonable belief that a crime has been committed and that the suspect committed it. A third incorrect approach would be to engage in a lengthy interrogation at the scene without securing the individual or properly advising them of their rights if they are in custody, and without sufficient grounds for detention. This could compromise the integrity of any subsequent investigation and potentially lead to the suppression of evidence, while also failing to address the immediate safety concerns. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with immediate threat assessment and scene safety. This is followed by a rapid, objective evaluation of the facts to determine if probable cause exists for an arrest under Texas Penal Code. If probable cause is established, the deputy should proceed with a lawful arrest, ensuring all procedural safeguards are met. If probable cause is not established, the deputy should document the incident and any observations, and consider other appropriate actions such as de-escalation or referral to other agencies if applicable, always acting within the bounds of Texas law and departmental policy. Question 2. Strategic planning requires a deputy in Harris County, Texas, to consider the most appropriate course of action when a suspect in custody, after being read their Miranda rights, states, "I don't want to talk about this right now." Which of the following actions best aligns with legal and ethical standards for law enforcement in Texas? Option A. Ask the suspect if they would be willing to discuss unrelated matters to gather general intelligence. Option B. Continue questioning the suspect about the incident, explaining the seriousness of the charges and the potential benefits of cooperation. Option C. Immediately cease all questioning related to the investigation until the suspect's attorney is present or the suspect voluntarily reinitiates communication. Option D. Inform the suspect that their silence will be interpreted as an admission of guilt and proceed with questioning. The correct answer is C. Immediately cease all questioning related to the investigation until the suspect's attorney is present or the suspect voluntarily reinitiates communication. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a deputy to balance the immediate need for information with the legal and ethical obligations to protect an individual's rights and maintain the integrity of a potential investigation. The deputy must make a rapid judgment call that could have significant consequences for the suspect's rights, the admissibility of evidence, and the overall effectiveness of law enforcement efforts in Harris County, Texas. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves prioritizing the suspect's constitutional rights, specifically the right against self-incrimination and the right to counsel, as guaranteed by the 5th and 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution and as interpreted by Texas law. This means ensuring the suspect is fully informed of their Miranda rights and that any waiver of these rights is knowing, voluntary, and intelligent before any custodial interrogation begins. If the suspect invokes their right to remain silent or requests an attorney, all questioning must cease immediately until counsel is present or the suspect reinitiates contact. This approach is correct because it strictly adheres to established legal precedent and departmental policy designed to protect individual liberties and ensure the lawful collection of evidence, thereby upholding the integrity of the justice system in Texas. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with questioning after the suspect has indicated a desire to remain silent, believing that the information is crucial for an immediate arrest. This fails to respect the suspect's invocation of their Fifth Amendment right and violates Miranda requirements, rendering any subsequent statements inadmissible in court. Prioritizes expediency over legal due process. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to elicit information by making promises or threats, such as suggesting leniency in exchange for cooperation or implying negative consequences if they do not speak. This constitutes coercion, which invalidates any waiver of rights and any statements obtained. It is a direct violation of due process and ethical law enforcement conduct. A third incorrect approach is to question the suspect about unrelated matters after they have invoked their right to remain silent regarding the primary offense. While seemingly a way to gather intelligence, if the intent is to circumvent the invocation of rights related to the main investigation, it can be viewed as an indirect interrogation and a violation of the spirit, if not the letter, of Miranda. The focus must remain on respecting the invoked right. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement must employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of constitutional rights and relevant Texas statutes. When faced with a situation involving potential interrogation, the immediate priority is to ensure Miranda warnings are properly administered and understood. If rights are invoked, the deputy must cease questioning. Any information gathering must then proceed through lawful channels that do not infringe upon the suspect's established rights. This systematic approach ensures that actions are legally sound, ethically defensible, and contribute to a just outcome. Question 3. Benchmark analysis indicates that a Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy responding to a disturbance call encounters an individual exhibiting aggressive behavior and refusing lawful commands. The individual is not overtly threatening immediate deadly harm, but is verbally abusive and making sudden movements. Considering the legal framework of Texas and departmental guidelines, which of the following actions best represents the deputy's professional and legal obligation in this situation? Option A. Use a level of force that is demonstrably higher than what appears immediately necessary to ensure compliance, anticipating that the individual might resist further. Option B. Disregard the individual's aggressive behavior and focus solely on issuing citations for minor offenses, delaying any physical intervention until a more severe threat is evident. Option C. Attempt to de-escalate the situation through clear verbal commands and tactical positioning, and if physical intervention becomes necessary, use only the minimum force required to gain control, followed by immediate and thorough documentation of the incident. Option D. Immediately use physical force to restrain the individual to prevent any potential escalation, regardless of whether de-escalation was attempted or feasible. The correct answer is C. Attempt to de-escalate the situation through clear verbal commands and tactical positioning, and if physical intervention becomes necessary, use only the minimum force required to gain control, followed by immediate and thorough documentation of the incident. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy involving a potential violation of Texas Penal Code and departmental policy regarding the use of force. The deputy must balance the immediate need to control a volatile situation with the legal and ethical obligations to use only the force necessary and to document actions accurately. Failure to do so can result in civil liability, criminal charges, and disciplinary action, impacting both the deputy's career and public trust in law enforcement. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves de-escalating the situation through verbal commands and tactical positioning, if feasible, before resorting to physical intervention. If physical intervention becomes necessary, the deputy must use only the minimum force required to gain control of the suspect and ensure safety. Crucially, immediate and thorough documentation of the incident, including the justification for the force used, is paramount. This aligns with Texas Penal Code Section 9:31, self-defense, and Section 9:32, deadly force in defense of person, which permit force only when reasonably believed necessary, and with Harris County Sheriff's Office policies emphasizing proportionality and accountability in the use of force. Accurate reporting ensures transparency and legal compliance. Incorrect approach is analysis. Using excessive force beyond what is reasonably necessary to control the suspect, even if the suspect is resisting, violates Texas Penal Code Section 9:31 and departmental use of force policies. Such an approach can lead to unnecessary injury and legal repercussions. Failing to document the incident or providing an incomplete or inaccurate report constitutes a violation of departmental policy and potentially obstructs justice. This lack of transparency undermines accountability and can be interpreted as an attempt to conceal misconduct. Ignoring the suspect's verbal commands and immediately resorting to physical force without attempting de-escalation or tactically feasible may not align with best practices in law enforcement and could be deemed an unnecessary use of force under Texas law if de-escalation was a viable option. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes de-escalation, proportionality of force, and meticulous documentation. This involves assessing the threat level, considering available tactical options, and applying force only as a last resort and to the minimum extent necessary. Post-incident, immediate and accurate reporting is essential to uphold legal and ethical standards. Question 4. Compliance review shows a Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy discovered a handgun during a lawful search of a residence. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the deputy to take regarding the handgun to ensure its evidentiary integrity and compliance with Texas law? Option A. Place the handgun into a standard evidence bag without initial detailed documentation, intending to log it later. Option B. Discuss the discovery of the handgun with other deputies not directly involved in the search before securing it. Option C. Secure the handgun and delay its formal logging and evidence processing until the end of the shift. Option D. Meticulously document the firearm's discovery, condition, and location, then carefully collect and secure it, ensuring immediate entry into the incident and evidence logs. The correct answer is D. Meticulously document the firearm's discovery, condition, and location, then carefully collect and secure it, ensuring immediate entry into the incident and evidence logs. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy regarding the proper handling of evidence, specifically a firearm discovered during a lawful search. The deputy must balance the immediate need to secure potential evidence with the procedural requirements for its collection, documentation, and chain of custody, all within the framework of Texas law and departmental policy. Failure to adhere to these protocols can compromise the integrity of the evidence, potentially jeopardizing a criminal prosecution and leading to internal disciplinary action. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously documenting the discovery of the firearm, including its exact location, condition, and any identifying marks, before carefully collecting it using appropriate protective measures to preserve its integrity. This documentation should be immediately entered into the official incident report and the evidence log, ensuring a clear and unbroken chain of custody from the point of discovery to its secure storage at the evidence facility. This approach directly aligns with Texas Code of Criminal Procedure Article 38:23, which governs the admissibility of evidence obtained through lawful searches and seizures, and emphasizes the importance of proper handling to maintain evidentiary integrity. It also adheres to the Harris County Sheriff's Office's internal policies on evidence management, which mandate thorough documentation and chain of custody protocols to prevent tampering or loss. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately placing the firearm into a standard evidence bag without any initial documentation or preservation measures. This fails to capture crucial contextual details about the firearm's condition and location at the time of discovery, which could be vital for investigative purposes and court testimony. It also risks compromising the firearm's forensic value if not handled with care. Another incorrect approach is to delay the formal logging and securing of the firearm until later in the shift, perhaps after other duties have been completed. This creates a gap in the chain of custody, making the evidence vulnerable to tampering, loss, or contamination. Such a delay directly violates the principle of immediate and continuous custody required by law and departmental policy. A third incorrect approach is to discuss the discovery of the firearm with unauthorized personnel, or to make assumptions about its relevance to the investigation without proper procedural steps. This could lead to the premature disclosure of sensitive information, potentially influencing witnesses or compromising the investigation. It also bypasses the established protocol for evidence handling and analysis. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement must adopt a systematic and procedural approach to evidence handling. This involves understanding and strictly adhering to the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure and departmental policies. The decision-making process should prioritize the preservation of evidence integrity, the establishment of a clear chain of custody, and accurate documentation at every step. When encountering evidence, deputies should ask, what is the item? Where was it found? What is its condition? How can I best preserve it? How do I document its discovery and transfer? This methodical approach ensures that evidence is admissible in court and that the investigative process is sound. Question 5. Operational review demonstrates that Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy has responded to a call regarding an individual exhibiting erratic behavior and expressing distress in a public park. The individual is not posing an immediate threat of violence to themselves or others, but appears disoriented and unable to articulate their needs clearly. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for the deputy? Option A. Leave the scene after a brief observation, concluding it is not a matter requiring immediate law enforcement intervention. Option B. Attempt to de-escalate the situation through calm communication and assess the individual's immediate needs while considering referral to mental health services if appropriate. Option C. Immediately detain the individual for evaluation due to their apparent disorientation and inability to care for themselves. Option D. Summon additional units with the primary objective of physically securing the individual for transport to a medical facility. The correct answer is B. Attempt to de-escalate the situation through calm communication and assess the individual's immediate needs while considering referral to mental health services if appropriate. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for law enforcement officers in Harris County, Texas, involving the potential for a citizen to be experiencing a mental health crisis. The difficulty lies in balancing the need to ensure public safety and the safety of the individual, while also respecting their rights and avoiding unnecessary escalation. The deputy must quickly assess the situation, determine the appropriate course of action, and act in a manner consistent with Texas law and departmental policy, all while under potential stress and time constraints. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves de-escalation techniques and seeking appropriate mental health resources. This approach prioritizes the well-being of the individual experiencing the crisis and aims to resolve the situation without resorting to force. It aligns with the Harris County Sheriff's Office's commitment to community policing and the understanding that individuals experiencing mental health crises often require specialized intervention rather than immediate arrest or detention for minor offenses. Texas law and departmental policies encourage officers to utilize mental health crisis intervention training (CIT) and to coordinate with mental health professionals when available, as this is the most effective and ethical way to address such situations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately attempting to detain the individual based solely on their agitated state and perceived inability to care for themselves, without first attempting de-escalation or assessing for immediate danger. This fails to recognize that agitation can be a symptom of a mental health crisis and may not constitute a criminal offense or an immediate threat requiring forceful intervention. Such an approach risks escalating the situation, causing further distress to the individual and potentially violating their rights. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the situation as a non-emergency and leave the scene without further assessment or offering assistance. This neglects the deputy's duty to respond to calls for service and to ensure the well-being of citizens, especially those who may be vulnerable. It also fails to address the potential underlying issues that led to the call, which could result in future problems or harm to the individual or others. A third incorrect approach is to immediately involve a more forceful response, such as calling for backup with the intent of immediate physical apprehension, without first attempting to communicate and de-escalate. This bypasses the opportunity to resolve the situation peacefully and could lead to unnecessary use of force, which is contrary to best practices and departmental policy for handling mental health crises. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Harris County, Texas, should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough assessment of the situation, prioritizing de-escalation and communication. This involves active listening, empathy, and attempting to build rapport. If de-escalation is successful and no immediate threat exists, the next step is to connect the individual with appropriate mental health services or resources. If de-escalation is not immediately successful, but the individual is not in imminent danger, the deputy should continue to attempt de-escalation while assessing for legal grounds for detention or arrest, always considering the least restrictive means necessary. If an imminent threat to self or others is present, the deputy must act to neutralize the threat while adhering to use-of-force policies and seeking appropriate medical or mental health evaluation post-apprehension. Question 6. Benchmark analysis indicates that when responding to a call in Harris County, Texas, involving an individual exhibiting signs of a mental health crisis and potentially erratic behavior, but not posing an immediate threat of serious harm to themselves or others, what is the most appropriate course of action for a deputy sheriff? Option A. Engage in aggressive questioning and demand immediate compliance to assert authority. Option B. Advise the caller that the situation does not appear to be an immediate emergency and leave the scene. Option C. Prioritize de-escalation techniques, attempt to build rapport, and assess the need for mental health intervention or referral to appropriate services. Option D. Immediately attempt to physically restrain the individual to prevent any potential future harm. The correct answer is C. Prioritize de-escalation techniques, attempt to build rapport, and assess the need for mental health intervention or referral to appropriate services. Explanation. Benchmark analysis indicates that effective deputy conduct in Harris County, Texas, hinges on a nuanced understanding of procedural justice and community engagement principles, particularly when responding to calls involving potential mental health crises. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires deputies to balance immediate public safety concerns with the need for de-escalation, respect for individual rights, and adherence to Texas law regarding mental health interventions. Misjudgments can lead to unnecessary escalation, harm to individuals, and erosion of public trust. The best professional approach involves prioritizing de-escalation techniques and seeking appropriate mental health resources. This approach is correct because it aligns with the Harris County Sheriff's Office's commitment to community policing and the principles of procedural justice, which emphasize fairness and transparency in interactions. Texas law and departmental policy encourage the use of crisis intervention training, CIT, and collaboration with mental health professionals when available. This method seeks to address the underlying issues contributing to the crisis, rather than solely relying on enforcement measures, thereby promoting better outcomes for the individual and the community. An approach that immediately resorts to physical restraint without attempting de-escalation or assessing the individual's immediate threat level is professionally unacceptable. This fails to adhere to the ethical imperative of using the least restrictive means necessary, and can be seen as a violation of an individual's rights if their behavior does not pose an imminent danger. Furthermore, it bypasses opportunities to involve specialized mental health services, which are often better equipped to handle such situations and can lead to more effective long-term solutions. Another incorrect approach involves dismissing the call as a non-emergency and leaving the scene without further assessment or offering assistance. This is professionally unacceptable, as it neglects the potential for harm to the individual experiencing a mental health crisis and to the public. It demonstrates a failure to uphold the duty to protect and serve, and it ignores the possibility that the situation could escalate if left unaddressed. Finally, an approach that involves aggressive questioning and demands for compliance without acknowledging the individual's distress or offering support is also professionally unacceptable. This can exacerbate the individual's anxiety and paranoia, making de-escalation impossible and potentially leading to a more volatile situation. It fails to recognize the unique challenges presented by mental health crises and the importance of empathy and patience. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough assessment of the situation, prioritizing de-escalation and communication. This involves active listening, showing empathy, and attempting to build rapport. If de-escalation is successful, the next step is to connect the individual with appropriate mental health resources. If de-escalation is not immediately possible, and there is an imminent threat, deputies must use the minimum force necessary to ensure safety, while continuing to seek opportunities for de-escalation and mental health intervention. Collaboration with mental health professionals and supervisors should be a continuous consideration throughout the interaction. Question 7. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a low-impact incident involving unauthorized access to sensitive inmate data within the Harris County (TX) Sheriff's Office. A deputy notices an unusual pattern of access attempts in the inmate record system that appears to originate from an internal but non-authorized terminal. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the deputy to take? Option A. Attempt to remotely disable the terminal showing the suspicious access attempts without reporting it. Option B. Continue monitoring the activity for a longer period to confirm it is a genuine threat before reporting. Option C. Immediately report the suspicious activity through the designated sheriff's office channels for IT security incidents. Option D. Discuss the observed activity with colleagues in the break room to gauge their opinions on the matter. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the suspicious activity through the designated sheriff's office channels for IT security incidents. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a low-impact incident involving unauthorized access to sensitive inmate data within the Harris County (TX) Sheriff's Office. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency with the paramount duty to protect confidential information, as mandated by Texas law and Sheriff's Office policy. A deputy must act decisively to mitigate the risk without compromising established protocols or creating new vulnerabilities. The best approach involves immediately reporting the potential breach, according to established Sheriff's Office protocols for data security incidents. This aligns with the Texas Public Information Act's provisions regarding the protection of sensitive personal information and the Sheriff's Office's internal policies designed to safeguard inmate data. Prompt and proper reporting ensures that the appropriate IT security personnel and supervisors are alerted, allowing for a swift and systematic investigation and remediation. This proactive measure is crucial for maintaining the integrity of the data, preventing further unauthorized access, and ensuring compliance with legal and ethical obligations. An incorrect approach would be to attempt to resolve the issue independently by deleting the suspicious activity logs without documenting or reporting it. This bypasses the established incident response procedures, prevents a proper investigation into the nature and extent of the potential breach, and could lead to the destruction of critical evidence. It violates the principle of accountability and undermines the Sheriff's Office's ability to learn from and prevent future incidents. Another incorrect approach is to discuss the potential breach with other deputies not directly involved in the incident response or data security. This constitutes an unauthorized disclosure of sensitive information, potentially violating inmate privacy rights and sheriff's office policy regarding confidential data. It creates unnecessary alarm and can lead to misinformation. Finally, ignoring the alert and hoping it resolves itself is a failure to act responsibly. This passive approach allows the potential vulnerability to persist, increasing the risk of a more significant data breach and demonstrating a disregard for the duty to protect sensitive information and uphold departmental policies. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established protocols, clear communication, and the protection of sensitive information. When faced with a potential security incident, the first step should always be to consult and follow the organization's defined incident response plan. This ensures a coordinated and effective response that minimizes risk and maintains compliance with legal and ethical standards. Question 8. Process analysis reveals that Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy, while on patrol in Harris County, Texas, observes a vehicle they recognize as belonging to a personal acquaintance committing a traffic violation. The deputy has a friendly but not close relationship with the individual. What is the most appropriate course of action for the deputy to take in this situation? Option A. Immediately let the acquaintance go without any further action, stating that the personal relationship prevents enforcement. Option B. Stop the vehicle, address the violation as if the driver were a stranger, and then later contact the acquaintance to discuss the stop. Option C. Proceed with the traffic stop, issue a verbal warning for the violation, and do not mention the personal acquaintance to anyone. Option D. Immediately inform a supervisor of the personal acquaintance and the observed violation, and request to be relieved of duty for this specific incident. The correct answer is D. Immediately inform a supervisor of the personal acquaintance and the observed violation, and request to be relieved of duty for this specific incident. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a deputy's duty to uphold the law and the potential for personal relationships to influence judgment. The need for impartiality and adherence to established procedures is paramount when dealing with individuals known to the deputy. Failure to do so can lead to accusations of favoritism, compromised investigations, and a breakdown of public trust in law enforcement. The deputy must navigate this situation with a clear understanding of their responsibilities and the ethical implications of their actions. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately disclosing the personal relationship to a supervisor and recusing oneself from any aspect of the investigation or enforcement action involving the acquaintance. This approach is correct because it upholds the principle of impartiality, a cornerstone of law enforcement ethics and the Harris County Sheriff's Office policies. By informing a supervisor, the deputy ensures that the situation is handled by an unbiased party, preventing any appearance of impropriety or conflict of interest. This aligns with the ethical obligation to serve the public interest without personal bias and adheres to departmental guidelines that mandate reporting such conflicts to maintain investigative integrity. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the traffic stop and issuing a warning without mentioning the personal connection. This is professionally unacceptable because it violates the duty of transparency and impartiality. The deputy is allowing a personal relationship to potentially influence their decision-making, even if the intention is to be lenient. This creates an appearance of favoritism, which erodes public trust and could lead to a formal complaint or disciplinary action for failing to report a conflict of interest as required by Harris County Sheriff's Office policy. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the acquaintance and continue with the stop as if they were a stranger, but then later discuss the incident with the acquaintance. This is also professionally unacceptable. While it might seem like an attempt to be fair during the stop, the subsequent discussion creates an ethical breach. It suggests that the deputy is willing to share details of official duties with someone they have a personal relationship with, potentially compromising the integrity of the stop and any subsequent actions. It also implies a willingness to discuss official matters outside of proper channels, which can be a violation of departmental procedures. A further incorrect approach is to immediately let the acquaintance go without any further action, citing the personal relationship as the sole reason. This is professionally unacceptable as it constitutes a direct failure to enforce the law based on personal connection, rather than objective observation of a violation. This is a clear act of favoritism and a dereliction of duty, violating the principle that all individuals should be treated equally under the law, regardless of their relationship with law enforcement officers. It undermines the authority of the Harris County Sheriff's Office and sets a dangerous precedent. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes integrity, impartiality, and adherence to policy. When a potential conflict of interest arises, such as encountering an acquaintance during official duties, the immediate steps should be: 1. Recognize the potential for bias or the appearance of bias. 2. Disclose the relationship to a supervisor promptly. 3. Recuse oneself from any involvement in the matter. 4. Follow the supervisor's guidance and departmental policy. This systematic approach ensures that all actions are defensible, ethical, and serve the best interests of the public and the department. Question 9. Benchmark analysis indicates that a Harris County TX Sheriff's Office deputy, while off-duty and socializing with neighbors, overhears a conversation about a sensitive, ongoing investigation that has not yet been made public. The deputy recognizes some of the details being discussed as accurate. Which of the following actions best upholds professional standards and departmental policy in Harris County, Texas? Option A. The deputy shares their knowledge of the investigation with their immediate family, emphasizing the need for discretion. Option B. The deputy discreetly excuses themselves from the conversation and makes a note to report the overheard information to their supervisor at the earliest opportunity. Option C. The deputy engages in the conversation, subtly correcting the inaccuracies and adding further details they know to be true to ensure the neighbors have the most accurate information. Option D. The deputy posts a vague but concerned message on a local community social media group, hinting at the seriousness of the ongoing investigation without revealing specific details. The correct answer is B. The deputy discreetly excuses themselves from the conversation and makes a note to report the overheard information to their supervisor at the earliest opportunity. Explanation. Benchmark analysis indicates that effective deputy conduct in Harris County, Texas, hinges on a nuanced understanding of departmental policy and Texas law, particularly concerning the handling of sensitive information and public trust. This scenario presents a professional challenge, because it requires a deputy to balance the immediate need for information with the long-term implications of unauthorized disclosure and the potential for reputational damage to the Harris County Sheriff's Office. The deputy must navigate the ethical imperative to uphold the law and departmental integrity against the temptation to share information that, while potentially interesting, is not officially sanctioned for public release. The best professional practice involves a deputy strictly adhering to established protocols for information dissemination. This means recognizing that information obtained during official duties, especially that which is not yet public record or is part of an ongoing investigation, is considered sensitive. The deputy should refrain from sharing such information with anyone outside of authorized personnel or official channels, regardless of their relationship or the perceived innocuousness of the sharing. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the principles of maintaining confidentiality, preventing the compromise of investigations, and upholding the public's trust in law enforcement. Texas law and Harris County Sheriff's Office policies emphasize the importance of safeguarding sensitive information and ensuring that only authorized individuals release official statements or details. Unauthorized disclosure can lead to legal repercussions, internal disciplinary action, and erosion of public confidence. Sharing details about an ongoing investigation with a neighbor, even if framed as a casual conversation, represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This action breaches confidentiality, potentially alerts suspects, and undermines the integrity of the investigation. It also violates departmental policies regarding the proper handling of sensitive information and the chain of command for releasing such details. Discussing the specifics of a traffic stop with a family member without explicit authorization and outside of official reporting is also professionally unacceptable. While seemingly less severe than discussing an ongoing investigation, it still constitutes an unauthorized disclosure of information obtained in an official capacity. This can lead to perceptions of favoritism or bias and violates the expectation of privacy for individuals involved in routine law enforcement interactions. Forwarding an unconfirmed rumor about a potential crime to a community group via social media is a grave dereliction of duty. This action not only violates policies against unauthorized information dissemination, but also risk spreading misinformation, inciting panic, and potentially jeopardizing an actual investigation before it has even been properly initiated or confirmed. It demonstrates a severe lack of judgment and in disregard for the responsible use of information. Professionals in law enforcement should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to policy, legal statutes, and ethical conduct. When faced with information obtained during official duties, deputies should ask, is this information officially cleared for public release? Am I authorized to share this information with this specific individual or group? What are the potential consequences of sharing this information, both for the investigation and for the public trust? If there is any doubt, the correct course of action is always to refrain from sharing and to consult with a supervisor or the appropriate department liaison. Question 10. The monitoring system demonstrates that a batch of seized electronics, including 3 laptops and 5 smartphones, has been processed for inventory. The original purchase price of the laptops was $800 each, and they are now 3 years old, with an estimated annual depreciation rate of 20%. The smartphones were purchased for $600 each and are 2 years old, with an estimated annual depreciation rate of 25%. Assuming a straight-line depreciation method, what is the total current estimated value of this batch of electronics for Harris County Sheriff's Office inventory purposes? Option A, $2, 560. Option B, $3, 800. Option C, $4, 000. Option D, $3, 200. The correct answer is A, $2, 560. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a critical need for accurate inventory management and accountability within the Harris County Sheriff's Office. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires deputies to not only understand the physical inventory of seized property, but also to accurately calculate its value for reporting and potential forfeiture proceedings. Errors in valuation can lead to significant legal and financial repercussions, impacting the integrity of evidence and the department's financial records. Strict adherence to established procedures and accurate mathematical application are paramount. The best professional practice involves a meticulous, documented approach to valuation. This includes cross-referencing multiple reliable sources for current market value, applying appropriate depreciation factors based on the item's condition and age, and clearly documenting all calculations and the sources used. This ensures transparency, defensibility in court, and compliance with Texas law regarding the handling and valuation of seized property. The use of a standardized formula for depreciation, applied consistently, is crucial for maintaining fairness and accuracy. An incorrect approach would be to rely on a single, potentially outdated, or subjective source for valuation. This fails to meet the standard of due diligence required for accurate financial reporting and evidence management. Another incorrect approach is to estimate value without any supporting documentation or calculation, which is unprofessional and legally indefensible. Finally, failing to account for depreciation, or applying it inconsistently, misrepresents the true current value of the property and violates principles of accurate accounting and reporting. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes accuracy, documentation, and adherence to established protocols. This involves understanding the specific legal requirements for property valuation in Texas, utilizing reliable resources, performing calculations with precision, and maintaining a clear audit trail for all actions taken. When in doubt, consulting with supervisors or specialized units, e.g., Property Division, legal counsel, is a critical step in ensuring compliance and maintaining professional integrity. Question 11. System analysis indicates that a Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy observes an individual loitering in a high-crime area late at night, exhibiting furtive movements and attempting to conceal their face when the patrol car approaches. The deputy believes the individual may be involved in criminal activity. Which of the following actions best upholds the deputy's duty to investigate while respecting the individual's constitutional rights under Texas law? Option A. Ask the individual if they are nervous and use their affirmative response as the primary justification for a prolonged detention and investigation. Option B. Immediately detain the individual based on the general observation of loitering in a high-crime area and furtive movements, without further specific justification. Option C. Conduct a full search of the individual's person and any visible belongings to ensure officer safety and gather potential evidence. Option D. Approach the individual, initiate a consensual conversation, and if articulable facts supporting reasonable suspicion of criminal activity are developed through the interaction, proceed with a lawful stop and investigation. The correct answer is D. Approach the individual, initiate a consensual conversation, and if articulable facts supporting reasonable suspicion of criminal activity are developed through the interaction, proceed with a lawful stop and investigation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for law enforcement officers in Harris County, Texas, balancing the immediate need for information with the constitutional rights of an individual during an interaction. The deputy must navigate the complexities of probable cause, reasonable suspicion, and the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches and seizures, all while operating within the specific legal framework of Texas law and the Harris County Sheriff's Office policies. The pressure to gather evidence quickly can sometimes lead to hasty decisions that may infringe upon an individual's rights, making careful judgment and adherence to established procedures paramount. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the deputy clearly articulating the specific, articulable facts that led to their suspicion of criminal activity. This approach aligns with the legal standard for reasonable suspicion established by the U.S. Supreme Court and adopted by Texas courts. Reasonable suspicion requires more than a mere hunch. It demands that the officer can point to specific observations that, when combined with their training and experience, lead them to believe that criminal activity is afoot. This includes detailing the suspect's behavior, the location, the time of day, and any other objective factors that contribute to the suspicion. By articulating these facts, the deputy demonstrates a lawful basis for the stop and any subsequent actions, thereby respecting the individual's Fourth Amendment rights while fulfilling their duty to investigate potential crime. This methodical approach ensures that any detention or search is justified and defensible. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to detain the individual based solely on a vague feeling or a general description, without any specific, observable behaviors or circumstances that suggest criminal activity. This fails to meet the threshold for reasonable suspicion and constitutes an unlawful seizure under the Fourth Amendment, as it lacks the necessary articulable facts. Another incorrect approach is to immediately conduct a full search of the individual's person or vehicle without establishing probable cause or obtaining consent. While a brief pat-down for weapons may be permissible under reasonable suspicion, Terry frisk, a more intrusive search requires a higher legal standard, such as probable cause to believe a crime has been committed and evidence will be found. Proceeding to a full search without this justification violates the individual's rights. A third incorrect approach is to rely on the individual's demeanor or nervousness alone as the sole justification for the stop and investigation. While nervousness can be a factor, it is not by itself sufficient to establish reasonable suspicion. Many innocent individuals may appear nervous when interacting with law enforcement. This approach risks profiling and detaining individuals without a legitimate legal basis. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement must employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes constitutional rights and legal standards. This involves a continuous assessment of the situation based on observable facts and a thorough understanding of relevant laws and policies. When encountering a situation that might warrant investigation, the deputy should ask, "What specific, articulable facts do I have that lead me to believe criminal activity is occurring or has occurred?" If the answer is vague or based on subjective feelings, further observation or information is needed before initiating a stop or detention. If the facts support reasonable suspicion, the deputy should clearly articulate those facts to justify the stop. Any subsequent action, such as a search, must be based on the appropriate legal standard, reasonable suspicion for a frisk, probable cause for a search, and clearly documented. This systematic approach ensures accountability, protects civil liberties, and upholds the integrity of law enforcement actions. Question 12. Benchmark analysis indicates that a Harris County TX Sheriff's Office deputy observes an individual loitering near a closed business late at night. The deputy approaches the individual, who appears nervous and avoids eye contact. The deputy asks the individual what they are doing there, and the individual mumbles a response. The deputy, feeling uneasy, asks to search the individual's backpack. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the deputy in this scenario, adhering to Harris County TX Sheriff's Office guidelines and Texas law? Option A. Inform the individual that they are free to leave if they have no reason to be in the area, and if they choose to remain, politely request consent to search the backpack, clearly stating that consent is voluntary and can be refused. Option B. Immediately search the backpack without asking for consent, believing that the individual's demeanor provides sufficient justification for a search. Option C. Detain the individual for further questioning and search the backpack without consent, as the late hour and location suggest a high probability of criminal intent. Option D. Conduct a pat-down search of the individual and their backpack based on their nervousness and mumbled response, as this indicates potential criminal activity. The correct answer is A. Inform the individual that they are free to leave if they have no reason to be in the area, and if they choose to remain, politely request consent to search the backpack, clearly stating that consent is voluntary and can be refused. Explanation. Benchmark analysis indicates that effective deputy conduct in Harris County, Texas, hinges on a nuanced understanding of legal boundaries and community interaction. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a deputy to balance the immediate need for information with the constitutional rights of an individual, specifically the right against unreasonable searches and seizures. The deputy must act within the strict confines of Texas law and the U.S. Constitution, particularly the Fourth Amendment, while also maintaining public trust and ensuring officer safety. Misjudging the situation could lead to legal repercussions for the deputy and the sheriff's office, as well as damage to community relations. The best professional practice involves a measured and legally sound approach. This means recognizing that, while a deputy may have a suspicion, that suspicion alone does not grant carte blanche to conduct a search without probable cause or a warrant, unless specific exceptions apply. The correct approach is to de-escalate the situation if possible, clearly articulate the reason for the stop, and if probable cause for a search develops through observation or consent, and proceed accordingly. If no probable cause exists, the deputy should inform the individual of their right to leave and allow them to do so, documenting the encounter. This aligns with the principles of lawful detention and search, respecting individual liberties as guaranteed by the Fourth Amendment and Texas Code of Criminal Procedure. An incorrect approach would be to conduct a search based solely on a hunch or a vague feeling of unease. This violates the Fourth Amendment's requirement for probable cause or reasonable suspicion for a stop and search. Another incorrect approach is to coerce or pressure an individual into consenting to a search when they have not clearly and voluntarily agreed. This undermines the principle of voluntary consent and can lead to evidence being suppressed in court. Finally, detaining an individual indefinitely without developing probable cause or reasonable suspicion beyond the initial stop also constitutes a violation of their rights. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes constitutional rights and legal statutes. This involves 1. Assessing the totality of the circumstances to determine if reasonable suspicion exists for an initial stop. 2. Clearly articulating the observed facts that support reasonable suspicion. 3. If the stop continues, observing for further developments that might elevate suspicion to probable cause. 4. Understanding the nuances of consent searches and ensuring any consent is voluntary and informed. And 5. Knowing when to disengage and allow an individual to leave if probable cause or reasonable suspicion is not established or maintained. Question. Benchmark analysis indicates that Harris County, TX, Sheriff's Office deputy observes an individual loitering near a closed business late at night. The deputy approaches the individual, who appears nervous and avoids eye contact. The deputy asks the individual what they are doing there, and the individual mumbles a response. The deputy, feeling uneasy, asks to search the individual's backpack. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the deputy in this scenario, adhering to Harris County, TX, Sheriff's Office guidelines and Texas law? Options. A. Inform the individual that they are free to leave if they have no reason to be in the area, and if they choose to remain, politely request consent to search the backpack, clearly stating that consent is voluntary and can be refused. B. Conduct a pat-down search of the individual and their backpack based on their nervousness and mumbled response, as this indicates potential criminal activity. C. Detain the individual for further questioning and search the backpack without consent, as the late hour and location suggest a high probability of criminal intent. D. Immediately search the backpack without asking for consent, believing that the individual's demeanor provides sufficient justification for a search. Question 13. Benchmark analysis indicates that a Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy arrives at a scene where a vehicle has been involved in a single-car accident. The driver appears disoriented and has a strong odor of alcohol emanating from their person. The deputy needs to determine if criminal activity has occurred and gather necessary information. Which of the following actions best aligns with best practices for a Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy in this situation? Option A. Immediately begin questioning the driver about their consumption of alcohol and their actions leading up to the accident to gather initial information. Option B. Allow the driver to leave the scene to seek medical attention without further interaction, as their disorientation is the primary concern. Option C. Secure the scene to preserve potential evidence. Immediately request a DWI unit or supervisor for specialized investigation and potential sobriety testing, and avoid questioning the driver extensively until specialized personnel arrive. Option D. Conduct a full search of the vehicle for any contraband or evidence of other crimes before assessing the driver's condition. The correct answer is C. Secure the scene to preserve potential evidence. Immediately request a DWI unit or supervisor for specialized investigation and potential sobriety testing, and avoid questioning the driver extensively until specialized personnel arrive. Explanation. Benchmark analysis indicates that effective law enforcement in Harris County, Texas, hinges on a deputy's ability to navigate complex situations with adherence to established protocols and ethical standards. This scenario presents a professionally challenging situation because it requires a deputy to balance the immediate need for information with the constitutional rights of an individual and the procedural requirements of law enforcement. The deputy must exercise careful judgment to avoid compromising an investigation or violating an individual's rights. The best professional practice involves securing the scene and immediately requesting specialized units equipped to handle evidence collection and sensitive interviews. This approach is correct because it prioritizes the integrity of potential evidence and ensures that any statements or observations are obtained in a manner that is legally admissible and ethically sound, in accordance with Texas Code of Criminal Procedure and relevant case law regarding custodial interrogations and search and seizure. By involving the appropriate personnel, the deputy upholds the principles of due process and maintains the chain of custody for any evidence. An incorrect approach would be to immediately question the individual extensively about their involvement without advising them of their rights, as this could lead to statements that are inadmissible in court due to Miranda violations. Another incorrect approach would be to conduct a thorough search of the vehicle without probable cause or a warrant, which would violate Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches and seizures. Finally, failing to secure the scene and allowing potential evidence to be disturbed or contaminated would compromise the investigation and hinder the ability of law enforcement to gather accurate information. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with scene assessment, followed by immediate safety considerations, then the preservation of evidence, and finally, the engagement of specialized units as dictated by the nature of the incident. This systematic approach ensures that all legal and ethical obligations are met, leading to a more effective and just outcome. Question 14. During the evaluation of a Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy's performance, a deputy responding to a domestic disturbance call observes a vehicle matching the description of one involved in a recent burglary parked in a driveway. The deputy believes the driver is the same individual seen fleeing the burglary scene. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the deputy? Option A. Proceed with the original domestic disturbance call without further action regarding the suspicious vehicle, as it is not the primary reason for the current dispatch. Option B. Immediately approach the vehicle and demand identification from the occupant, stating the suspicion of involvement in the recent burglary. Option C. Maintain a safe observation point, request backup, and notify dispatch of the developing situation while continuing to monitor the vehicle and its occupants for further suspicious activity. Option D. Initiate a traffic stop on the vehicle immediately, as it matches the description of a vehicle involved in a felony. The correct answer is C. Maintain a safe observation point, request backup, and notify dispatch of the developing situation while continuing to monitor the vehicle and its occupants for further suspicious activity. Explanation. During the evaluation of a Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy's performance, a scenario arises where a deputy, responding to a domestic disturbance call in a residential area, observes a vehicle matching the description of one involved in a recent burglary. The vehicle is parked in a driveway, and the deputy notes that the driver appears to be the same individual seen fleeing the burglary scene. The deputy has not yet made contact with the occupants of the residence or the vehicle. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the deputy to balance the immediate need to investigate a potential crime with the imperative to act within the bounds of established legal and departmental procedures, ensuring the safety of all parties involved and respecting constitutional rights. The deputy must make a swift, informed decision based on limited information and evolving circumstances. The best professional practice in this situation involves a measured and procedural approach. The deputy should maintain a safe distance, observe the vehicle and its occupants for any further suspicious activity or immediate threats, and simultaneously request backup and informed dispatch of the developing situation, including the potential link to the burglary. This approach prioritizes officer safety, allows for the gathering of additional information, and ensures that any subsequent action is taken with appropriate support and under established protocols, aligning with the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure and Harris County Sheriff's Office policy regarding investigative stops and probable cause. An incorrect approach would be to immediately approach the vehicle and demand identification, or attempt to detain the occupant based solely on a visual match in proximity to a crime scene, without further corroborating evidence or observable suspicious behavior from the vehicle's occupants. This could be construed as an unlawful stop or detention, violating the Fourth Amendment rights of the individual and potentially compromising the investigation if the individual is not involved. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the vehicle and continue with the original domestic disturbance call without documenting the observation or taking any investigative steps. This would be a failure to act on potentially critical information related to another ongoing investigation, which could have significant consequences for apprehending a suspect and recovering stolen property, and would be a dereliction of duty. A third incorrect approach would be to initiate a high-risk traffic stop without sufficient justification or backup, potentially escalating the situation unnecessarily and endangering the public and the deputy. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes situational awareness, adherence to legal standards, such as reasonable suspicion for investigative stops, departmental policy, and officer safety. This involves a continuous assessment of the threat level, the gathering of information, and the methodical application of established procedures before taking decisive action. Question 15. What factors determine the legality of a warrantless vehicle search conducted by a Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy? Option A. A tip from an anonymous informant that the vehicle may contain illegal items without further corroboration. Option B. The deputy's subjective feeling that the individual involved is acting suspiciously. Option C. The deputy's ability to articulate specific, observable facts that create a fair probability of finding contraband or evidence of a crime in the vehicle. Option D. The driver's general nervousness when questioned by law enforcement. The correct answer is C. The deputy's ability to articulate specific, observable facts that create a fair probability of finding contraband or evidence of a crime in the vehicle. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for law enforcement officers in Harris County, Texas, balancing the immediate need for information with the constitutional rights of individuals encountered during an investigation. The deputy must navigate the complexities of probable cause, reasonable suspicion, and the exclusionary rule, all while operating within the specific legal framework of Texas and federal constitutional law as applied in Texas. The pressure to solve a crime quickly can lead to shortcuts, but such actions can compromise the integrity of evidence and the case itself. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the deputy meticulously documenting all observations and interactions that contribute to establishing probable cause for a search. This means clearly articulating the specific, articulable facts that led to the belief that contraband was present in the vehicle. This approach aligns with the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, as interpreted by Texas courts, which requires probable cause for a warrantless search of a vehicle. By focusing on observable facts and avoiding assumptions or reliance on unreliable information, the deputy ensures that any evidence obtained is admissible in court, thereby upholding the integrity of the investigation and the justice system. This methodical documentation is crucial for presenting a strong case to prosecutors and defending against potential challenges to the search's legality. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves the deputy relying solely on a hunch or a vague tip from an anonymous source without independent corroboration. This fails to meet the specific and articulable facts standard required for reasonable suspicion, let alone probable cause. Such a search would likely be deemed unconstitutional, leading to the suppression of any evidence found under the exclusionary rule, as per established Texas and federal jurisprudence. Another incorrect approach is to conduct a search based on the individual's nervous demeanor alone. While nervousness can be a factor, it is rarely sufficient on its own to establish probable cause. Law enforcement officers are trained to recognize that individuals may exhibit nervousness when interacting with police for various reasons unrelated to criminal activity. Relying solely on this subjective observation risks violating an individual's rights and rendering any resulting evidence inadmissible. A third incorrect approach is to detain the individual for an extended period without developing further justification, hoping that they will eventually provide consent to a search. Prolonged detention without reasonable suspicion can escalate into an unlawful seizure. Furthermore, consent obtained under duress or prolonged detention may be deemed involuntary and inadmissible. The focus should always be on developing lawful grounds for any investigative action. Professional reasoning. Law enforcement professionals in Harris County must employ a decision-making process rooted in constitutional law and departmental policy. This involves a continuous assessment of the facts and circumstances, always erring on the side of caution when an individual's rights are at stake. When encountering a situation that might warrant a search, the deputy should ask, "What specific, observable facts do I have that, when taken together, create a fair probability that contraband or evidence of a crime will be found in this location?" If the answer cannot be clearly articulated and supported by objective evidence, further investigation or observation is required before proceeding with a search. This systematic approach ensures that actions are legally sound and ethically defensible. Question 16. Benchmark analysis indicates that Harris County Sheriff's Office deputies must navigate complex ethical landscapes. If a deputy, while on patrol in Harris County, Texas, receives information about potential criminal activity that directly involves a close personal friend, what is the most appropriate course of action to uphold departmental integrity and the law? Option A. Proceed with the investigation as normal, assuming personal impartiality can be maintained despite the close relationship. Option B. Subtly alter patrol routes or investigative focus to avoid direct involvement with the friend's activities without formally reporting the connection. Option C. Immediately report the potential conflict of interest and the personal relationship to a supervisor, requesting reassignment of the investigation. Option D. Ignore the information received about the friend's potential involvement to avoid any appearance of impropriety or conflict. Correct answer is C. Immediately report the potential conflict of interest and the personal relationship to a supervisor, requesting reassignment of the investigation. Explanation. Benchmark analysis indicates that effective law enforcement requires a nuanced understanding of departmental policy and ethical conduct, particularly when dealing with sensitive information and potential conflicts of interest. This scenario is professionally challenging because Deputy Miller is presented with information that could directly benefit a personal acquaintance, creating a conflict between his duty to uphold the law impartially and his personal relationships. The need for careful judgment is paramount to avoid any perception or reality of favoritism or impropriety. The best professional practice involves immediately and transparently reporting the potential conflict of interest to a supervisor. This approach is correct because it adheres to the core principles of integrity and accountability expected of Harris County Sheriff's Office deputies. By disclosing the information and his personal connection, Deputy Miller initiates a process where his supervisor can assign the case to another officer, thereby ensuring an unbiased investigation and preventing any appearance of impropriety. This aligns with the ethical standards and departmental regulations that mandate officers to avoid situations where their personal interests could compromise their official duties. Failing to report the potential conflict of interest and proceeding with the investigation would be professionally unacceptable. This approach violates the ethical obligation to maintain impartiality and avoid conflicts of interest. As outlined in law enforcement codes of conduct and departmental policies. It creates a direct risk of compromising the integrity of the investigation and eroding public trust. Another professionally unacceptable approach would be to subtly steer the investigation away from the acquaintance's property without formally reporting the conflict. This is unethical because it involves active concealment and manipulation of official duties for personal reasons, even if no direct benefit is sought. It undermines the principle of equal application of the law and demonstrates a lack of integrity. Finally, deciding to ignore the information altogether and not act on it because of the personal connection is also professionally unacceptable. While it might seem like an attempt to avoid a conflict, it constitutes a dereliction of duty. Deputies are sworn to uphold the law and investigate all credible information, and failing to do so based on personal relationships is a breach of their oath and departmental responsibilities. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, impartiality, and adherence to policy. When faced with a potential conflict of interest, the immediate step should be to identify the conflict, consult relevant departmental policies and ethical guidelines, and report the situation to a supervisor for guidance and appropriate reassignment. This proactive approach safeguards the integrity of law enforcement operations and maintains public confidence. Question 17. Benchmark analysis indicates that when a Harris County TX Sheriff's Office deputy observes a potential criminal incident occurring just beyond the established county line, the most appropriate immediate action is to: Option A. Contact Harris County Sheriff's Office dispatch to report the incident and request the appropriate agency be notified. Option B. Attempt to contact officers from the adjacent jurisdiction directly via personal radio frequency. Option C. Immediately cross the county line to investigate and potentially detain individuals involved. Option D. Continue patrolling within Harris County and disregard the observed incident. The correct answer is A. Contact Harris County Sheriff's Office dispatch to report the incident and request the appropriate agency be notified. Explanation: benchmark analysis indicates that effective law enforcement requires a nuanced understanding of jurisdictional boundaries and the appropriate use of authority within those limits. This scenario is professionally challenging because Deputy Miller is faced with a situation that appears to fall outside his immediate jurisdiction, requiring him to make a swift decision that balances the need for immediate assistance with adherence to established protocols and legal authority. Misjudging this situation could lead to legal repercussions, departmental sanctions, or a failure to provide necessary aid, impacting public trust and safety. The best professional practice involves recognizing the limitations of one's jurisdiction and initiating the correct interagency communication protocol. This approach prioritizes legal compliance and ensures that the situation is handled by the authority best equipped and legally empowered to do so. By contacting the Harris County Sheriff's Office dispatch and relaying the information, Deputy Miller is acting within his scope of authority, ensuring proper documentation, and facilitating a coordinated response from the relevant law enforcement agency. This aligns with Texas law enforcement guidelines that emphasize jurisdictional integrity and the importance of proper dispatch and coordination for effective public safety. An incorrect approach would be to directly intervene in a situation clearly outside of Harris County jurisdiction without proper authorization or coordination. This could involve entering another jurisdiction to make an arrest or conduct an investigation, which violates the territorial jurisdiction principles of Texas law enforcement. Such an action could be construed as an unlawful exercise of authority, potentially leading to legal challenges against the deputy and the Harris County Sheriff's Office, and could compromise the investigation or apprehension by the proper authorities. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the situation entirely due to it being outside of his immediate jurisdiction. While respecting jurisdictional boundaries is crucial, failing to report a potentially significant event to the appropriate authorities demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for public safety. This inaction could have serious consequences if the situation escalates and could be seen as a dereliction of duty, even if the initial event did not occur within his direct territorial purview. A further incorrect approach would be to attempt to handle the situation unilaterally by making contact with the other jurisdiction's officers directly without going through official dispatch channels. While the intent might be to expedite assistance, bypassing established communication protocols can lead to confusion, miscommunication, and a breakdown in the chain of command. This can result in duplicated efforts, missed critical information, or even conflicting actions by different law enforcement entities, undermining the overall effectiveness of the response. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear assessment of the situation and their own jurisdictional authority. When an event appears to fall outside of that authority, the next step is to consult established protocols for interagency cooperation and communication. This typically involves contacting dispatch or a supervisor to relay the information and request assistance from the appropriate agency. Documentation of all actions taken, including the initial observation and the communication with dispatch, is also a critical component of professional conduct. Question 18. Governance review demonstrates that a Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy, responding to a routine traffic stop, observes a suspicious bag in the passenger seat of the vehicle. The driver appears nervous and evasive when asked about its contents. What is the most appropriate course of action for the deputy to take immediately following this observation? Option A. Open the bag to visually inspect its contents to determine if it poses an immediate threat or contains contraband. Option B. Secure the scene and the vehicle and immediately contact a supervisor or the relevant investigative unit to report the discovery and request guidance on further steps. Option C. Ignore the bag and proceed with the traffic stop, documenting only the initial reason for the stop. Option D. Question the driver extensively about the bag's contents, attempting to elicit a confession or admission of guilt. The correct answer is B. Secure the scene and the vehicle, and immediately contact a supervisor or the relevant investigative unit to report the discovery and request guidance on further steps. Explanation. Governance review demonstrates that the Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy exam is designed to assess a deputy's understanding of their responsibilities and adherence to established protocols. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a deputy to balance the immediate need for information with the strict legal and ethical boundaries governing evidence handling and the rights of individuals. Careful judgment is required to avoid compromising an investigation or violating constitutional protections. The best professional practice involves securing the scene and immediately notifying the appropriate investigative unit or supervisor. This approach is correct because it prioritizes the integrity of potential evidence and ensures that the investigation is conducted by personnel trained and authorized to handle such matters. This aligns with the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure and departmental policies that mandate proper evidence chain of custody and prohibit unauthorized access or tampering with evidence. It respects the rights of the individual by not conducting an interrogation outside of established legal procedures. An incorrect approach would be to immediately question the individual about the contents of the bag without proper authorization or Miranda warnings. This fails to respect the individual's right against self-incrimination and could lead to inadmissible evidence. Another incorrect approach is to open the bag to visually inspect its contents without a warrant or probable cause, which could constitute an illegal search and seizure under the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and Texas law. Finally, ignoring the bag and proceeding without documenting its discovery would be a failure to properly secure potential evidence, jeopardizing the investigation and violating departmental procedures for evidence management. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance, departmental policy, and the preservation of evidence. This involves a systematic approach. First, secure the scene and any potential evidence. Second, identify the nature of the situation and any immediate threats. Third, consult with supervisors or investigative units for guidance on next steps. And fourth, act strictly within legal and policy parameters regarding searches, seizures, and interrogations. Question 19. The audit findings indicate a pattern of deputies occasionally storing seized items, such as suspected contraband or items of evidentiary value, in their patrol vehicles for extended periods before transferring them to the Sheriff's Office evidence locker. Considering the Harris County Sheriff's Office's commitment to maintaining the integrity of evidence for legal proceedings, which of the following actions best upholds these standards? Option A. Entrusting the temporary storage of the evidence to a civilian office assistant who is not part of the evidence handling unit, with a brief verbal instruction to keep it safe. Option B. Storing the seized items in an unlocked, open area of the patrol vehicle, with a verbal note to oneself to process it later, assuming the items are unlikely to be tampered with. Option C. Disposing of small, seemingly insignificant items of potential evidence found during a search, such as loose change or minor debris, to reduce clutter in the patrol vehicle, without formal documentation. Option D. Immediately securing the evidence in a designated locked compartment within the patrol vehicle, meticulously documenting its condition and location, and initiating the transfer process to the evidence custodian as soon as operationally feasible. The correct answer is D. Immediately securing the evidence in a designated locked compartment within the patrol vehicle, meticulously documenting its condition and location, and initiating the transfer process to the evidence custodian as soon as operationally feasible. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential lapse in procedural adherence within the Harris County Sheriff's Office, specifically concerning the handling of evidence. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires deputies to balance immediate operational needs with strict legal and departmental protocols for evidence integrity. Failure to maintain proper chain of custody or secure evidence can lead to its inadmissibility in court, jeopardizing investigations and undermining public trust in law enforcement. The core tension lies in ensuring evidence is preserved and accounted for while deputies are actively engaged in law enforcement duties. The best professional practice involves meticulously documenting all evidence handling, from initial seizure to storage, and ensuring it is transferred to the designated evidence custodian without delay. This approach prioritizes the integrity of the evidence and adheres to Texas Code of Criminal Procedure Article 38:23, which governs the admissibility of evidence and emphasizes lawful acquisition. By immediately securing and documenting the evidence and initiating the transfer process, deputies uphold their duty to preserve the integrity of potential evidence, thereby supporting the judicial process and maintaining departmental standards for evidence management. An approach that involves temporarily storing the evidence in an unsecured location within the patrol vehicle, even with the intention of processing it later, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This practice creates a high risk of contamination, tampering, or loss, directly violating the principles of chain of custody and potentially rendering the evidence inadmissible under Texas law. Another unacceptable approach is to delegate the secure storage of evidence to an untrained civilian employee without proper oversight or documentation, as this bypasses established departmental protocols and introduces an unacceptable level of risk to evidence integrity. Furthermore, an approach that involves discarding minor, seemingly insignificant items of potential evidence without proper documentation or authorization is a critical failure, as the relevance of evidence can only be determined by the courts, and unauthorized disposal is a direct violation of evidence preservation mandates. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established protocols and legal requirements. When faced with evidence, the immediate step should be to secure it, document its condition and location, and initiate the formal chain of custody process, as outlined by the Harris County Sheriff's Office policy and Texas law. If immediate processing or transfer is not feasible, the evidence must be stored in a secure, designated location that maintains its integrity until it can be properly handled by the evidence custodian. Any deviation from these procedures should be avoided, and deputies should seek clarification or assistance from supervisors or the evidence unit if circumstances present challenges to strict adherence. Question 20. Benchmark analysis indicates that a Harris County Sheriff's Office deputy worked 45 hours during a standard workweek. The deputy's regular hourly rate of pay is $25.00. Based on Texas labor law and typical Harris County Sheriff's Office overtime policy, what is the total overtime pay the deputy should receive for that workweek? Option A, $175.00. Option B, $150.00. Option C, $187.50. Option D, $125.00. The correct answer is C, $187.50. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for law enforcement officers in Harris County, Texas, involving the accurate calculation of overtime pay, which directly impacts departmental budgets and officer compensation. Miscalculations can lead to financial discrepancies, potential grievances, and erosion of trust between the sheriff's office and its deputies. Adhering to the specific overtime policies and Texas labor laws is paramount for maintaining fairness and legal compliance. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously calculating overtime hours based on the official timekeeping records and the established overtime pay rate as defined by Harris County Sheriff's Office policy and relevant Texas statutes. This approach ensures accuracy, fairness to the deputy, and adherence to budgetary controls. Specifically, it requires identifying all approved overtime hours worked, multiplying them by the designated overtime rate, which is typically 1.5 times the regular hourly rate for hours exceeding 40 in a workweek, as per Texas law and common departmental policy, and ensuring the total reflects the actual time spent on duty. This method directly aligns with the principles of fiscal responsibility and equitable compensation mandated by law and departmental regulations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves rounding overtime hours up to the nearest full hour without regard to the precise duration worked. This is ethically problematic as it constitutes overpayment and misrepresents actual work performed, potentially violating budgetary guidelines and principles of accurate financial reporting. It also sets a precedent for inaccurate record keeping. Another incorrect approach is to exclude brief periods of overtime that fall below a certain threshold, e.g., 15 minutes, from the calculation, even if these periods accumulate over a pay period. This is incorrect because Texas labor law generally requires compensation for all hours worked, and departmental policy should specify how to handle partial hours, not arbitrarily exclude them. Such an approach can lead to underpayment and potential legal challenges. A further incorrect approach is to use a flat overtime rate that does not account for the statutory requirement of time and a half for hours worked beyond 40 in a workweek. This directly contravenes Texas labor law and departmental policy, leading to underpayment of deputies and potential legal repercussions for the sheriff's office. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement must employ a systematic and data-driven approach to financial matters like overtime calculation. This involves understanding and strictly adhering to all relevant policies and legal mandates. When faced with calculations, it is crucial to 1. Identify all relevant data points, hours worked, regular rate of pay. 2. Consult the governing policies and laws, Harris County Sheriff's Office overtime policy, Texas labor laws. 3. Apply the correct formulas and calculation methods. 4. Double-check the results for accuracy. 5. Document the calculation process clearly. This methodical approach minimizes errors, ensures fairness, and upholds professional integrity.